بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے بس میں ماتم سجائی جاتی ہے مسند غم بچھائی جاتی رن کو اکبر چلے تو ماں نے کہا رن کو اکبر چلے تو ماں نے کہا رن کو اکبر چلے تو ماں نے کہا عمر بھر کی کمائی جاتی ہے مسند غم بچھائی جاتی خون میں ڈوبے ہیں یوں علی اکبر خون میں ڈوبے ہیں یوں علی اکبر خون میں ڈوبے ہیں یوں علی اکبر جیسے چادر اڑائی جاتی ہے مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ایک ریدا دے دو شاہ کو کبرا تیر گردن پہ کھا لو اے اصغر تیر گردن پہ کھا لو اے اصغر پیاس یوں بھی بجھائی جاتی ہے مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے یاد آتی ہے ایک ننھی لد یاد آتی ہے ایک ننھی لد جب بھی شمع جلائی جاتی ہے مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے بولی زینب اٹھو اٹھو عابد بولی زینب اٹھو اٹھو عابد بولی زینب اٹھو اٹھو عابد آگ گھر میں لگائی جاتی ہے जाई जाती है। मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة تسبقه للصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويباب نجاة الأمة، يا غريب الغرباء يا مظلوم كربلاء السلام على من جعل الله الشفاء في تربته السلام على من الإجابة تحت قبته السلام على ساكن كربلاء فيا ليتنا ثم يا ليتنا وكنا معكم سادتي يا سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما أما بعد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون صدق الله العلي العظيم وآمنا به نوروا مجالسكم بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد Second of your loudest salawat to hasten the reappearance of Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. Hibai, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within the Quran invokes the intellect to ponder over the reality of existence. And in order to get to the verse of the Quran, there is a number of muqaddimat or introductions that set tone for our discussion tonight, the last night of Shahr Dhil Hijjah, on what is apparent and according to the announcements that have been made from the offices of various maraja. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the virtuous ulama and the virtuous maraja in these difficult periods of ghaibat al-kubra. For according to announcements that have been made, tomorrow night, Laylatul Jum'ah, being the first night of Shahr Muharram. Our existence, when you ponder over your creation, you find that the human being is made up, or the human being's existence consists of two elements and two aspects. You have the body and you have the soul. The body, our physical being, what we see, head, limbs, hands, organs, so on and so forth. And on the other hand, you have a part of your existence, your soul. And for the sake of simplicity, if you were to take the word ruh or nafs, both to mean soul, even though they have vast distinctions between them, but for the sake of simplicity, your soul. And you find that between the body and the soul, there are similarities, there are commonalities, and at the same time, there are great differences between the both. The body, yani the jism, the physical body which we have, is in need of nutrition. The physical body that we have is prone to disease and is prone to sickness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from every type of sickness. Body is prone to sickness. Body is in need of nutrition. And similarly, you find that the ruh or the soul of a person, just like the way the body is in need of nutrition, the soul is also in need of nutrition. Just like the way the body is prone to sickness, the soul is also prone to disease and sickness. Which is why you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refer to this state within the Quran, where He says, وَعَلَىٰ وَعَنْ قُلُوبِهِمْ وَفِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. For example, the hearts or the souls are sick, alluding to what? Just like the way the body can be damaged and can be hurt, and its growth can be jeopardized by viruses and diseases, there are these viruses and diseases that exist that can corrupt the soul and inhibit the growth of the soul. Imagine a sickness that restricts the growth of the body. And then you have a sickness or a disease that begins to attack the body in itself and makes it weaker, until it overcomes the body and the body becomes lifeless in that it ceases to function. Similarly, spiritual diseases that attack the soul are of the same nature. Spiritual disease, for example, by the way of sin. There are these certain sins that inhibit, that restrict the growth of your spiritual, it restricts your spiritual growth. The soul cannot grow. The soul doesn't get nourishment. And then you have certain types of diseases, certain type of sins, if you may say, that not only restrict your spiritual growth, the growth of the ruh, but it actually begins to damage and attack the soul. Soul becomes corrupt, like this body that is now in the reactive mode to viruses. The body doesn't know how to react. Which is why Allah protects all of our loved ones and ourselves from every type of sickness and disease. But you notice a person who's been tribulated, who's been tried with cancer, for example, and they say at the final moments, the organs begin to shut down, but the body's given up. Similarly, there are certain diseases, there are certain sins that we commit where the soul goes into shutdown mode. What does it mean when the soul goes into shutdown mode? The soul is not receptive to guidance. And this state becomes worse and worse. And just like the way a disease and a virus attacks the body to the extent that the body becomes lifeless and cannot function, the spiritual diseases, sins attack the soul such that now it is irresponsive to guidance in its totality. Which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and He points towards these human beings who are irreceptive to guidance. سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَأَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. They have reached a stage of spiritual corruption. Their soul is so polluted and attacked by these spiritual diseases and the spiritual viruses in the form of sin and whatnot. Their heart is just not responsive to guidance anymore. You could perform a miracle for them, and still it will not affect them. And you see the peak of this in Karbala. Sayyid al-Shuhada, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil. And we will elaborate on this inshallah if we have the tawfiq from the Mawla in the nights of Muharram. Yawm Ashura, Imam al-Hussein Sayyid al-Shuhada performed miracles for the people in the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad. Mu'jizat were performed in front of them. A person witnesses a miracle and still the heart is not affected. How dirty that, how polluted that soul is. You and I, Ahibai, are prone to the same dangers. Just like in the world of biology or under the rules of biology and the system of creation in which we've been created, the body, if not protected, and the body, if measures are not taken, is going to be subject to harm and pain and disease. Same thing with the soul. High commonalities between the body and the soul. And then there are differences between the body and the soul. The body and the soul, by way of clarification, the relationship between body and soul is like the soul or the body is a vehicle which is carrying the soul. Death, maut, is the infikak or the separation between body and soul. Your soul is restricted to your body while you are in the dunya. Hence, you can only be in one place at one time. Death is the separation of the soul from the body, whereby your soul now is not restricted to the constraint of your body. Which is why we have within our hadith that when a person passes away and the Salat al-Mayyit is being recited, the soul of the deceased is lingering over the janazah. It is looking at its own body like the way you look at like a third party person. How you see yourself in a dream. Sometimes when you're sleeping, you're dreaming, you can see yourself walking, traveling, going to different places. You see yourself as if you're a third party, like you're a third person. You're seeing yourself. Nafsushi, which is why even in dreams and in sleep, they're from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Same thing with death. The soul now can see itself and it sees everyone that is around it. Which is why they say in the Salatul Mayyit that the soul recognizes and it starts to look. Number one, it looks at its own body because the soul now is in a different realm of existence. Our existence, what we have lived up till our final time on earth is that our soul is inside of our body. The only time we see ourselves as third parties is in our dreams, for example. But now this reality hits home. So the soul is in shock. It's adapting to this new realm of existence. And at the same time, it sees all these people standing up and reciting salat. And you can imagine the state of the soul where you have the people, Salatul Mayyit in essence is dua. And people say, Allahumma inna la na'lamu minhu illa khayra wa anta a'lamu bihi minna. This is to be recited before the final takbir, the dua in Salatul Mayyit. Ya Allah, we do not know anything of this person who has passed away except goodness. Wa anta ya Allah. Ya Allah, anta a'lamu bihi minna. Ya Allah, you know his deeds, you know him better than us. And over here the soul trembles. Which is why they say, even when you do the ghusl for a mayyat, for the deceased person, as you know, giving ghusl al-mayyat is wajib kifa'i. Wajib kifa'i meaning it's a wajib upon every one of us. And God forbid, if a person is not given ghusl of mayyat, all of us are responsible in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wajib kifa'i doesn't mean we don't learn. Into shabab, the peak of your youth, the peak of your days, these are the times to learn and to take up responsibilities like these, because you don't know when you may be called on to duty. Just like Iqamat al-Majalis, Majalis of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You see the shabab that have gone through efforts, made the impossible possible. carrying out a duty in essence which has wujud towards it. Attendance in itself is a statement, whether we recognize or we don't recognize, is receiving attention in the highest levels of the jinan. In any case, I still have to ghusl al-mayyit. It's important for us to learn how to give ghusl, which is why they say when you're even giving ghusl to the mayyit, do not use extremely hot water. Why? The ruh can feel. When you turn the body gently. Why? Because the ruh is witnessing. When you give ghusl, cover the body decently and do not leave him or her exposed. Why? Because the soul can see this and it affects them. And when you finally take the soul, when you take the body to the graveyard and you are lifting the janazah on your shoulders, what does the hadith say? Do not rush towards taking the dead body into the grave, because the soul now is realizing this is my final abode. I'm coming to this 6-foot hole in the ground, which is going to be my permanent home. You've noticed sometimes you move to a new country, you move to a new neighborhood, you move to a new house. Have you seen sometimes how the children react? Even if you are in the same neighborhood, but you move to a different house, and see how the child goes and looks at all the rooms and wants to be comfortable, and they're scared of this room and they don't like that room. It's your abode. It's human nature. It's within the nature of the soul that when it enters into a new abode or into a new environment, that it becomes cautious. You can imagine now the ruh, the soul, is entering into this realm in which there is accountability. This is not a majlis of fear or a talk of fear. La, whether you fear or you don't fear. It's a reality. This is where we're going. And if we know this is where we're going, we need to understand what happens so that we prepare in accordance. If anything, it's supposed to be more of a motivation than to be fear. And the khasatan motivation for us because of the leaders who we ascribe ourselves to and who we affiliate with. In any case, it says, do not rush. 61 says, do not rush with the mayyit towards the grave. Because you can see the abode, which is why you find that when you take the dead body, when you take the janazah to the maqbara, to the graveyard, 3 times we have this concept called manzil. You lower down the tabut or the janazah, you wait for a few moments, then you lift it and you proceed. Why? You are giving time to the soul to acclimatize, to digest the reality of where it is headed. In one way, look at the rahmah of the Imam. He puts and ordains upon us a sunnah in order to make it easy for our deceased ones. How great is our Mawla? At that time, he's thinking about the trembling of the nafs and the ruh. For the soul's existence continues. The existence of the soul surpasses the existence of the body. And the soul is moving towards eternity. فَأَحِبَّائِ, if we come back to the body of our majlis, and we say that man's existence is divided into 2, body and soul, and you know for a fact without the shadow of a doubt that the existence of your body is temporary. And through death, this body will decay in the grave for most. And there are exceptions. But for most, they will decay. And even this body may become old and frail as life continues. But the existence of the soul will continue. If I know the body is temporary and the continuance of this soul is towards eternity, then I need to ensure the nutrition of my soul while I am on this earth. Preserve my soul. nourish my soul. This is the first point of contemplation. And I speak to myself before I speak to anyone. How much time I spend in a day beautifying my body, my beard, my hair, my physique. How much time I spend on the beautification of my body, which is temporary. Not to say that we shouldn't. Within the boundaries and guidelines that are narrated within the hadith. But how much time I spend on the beautification of a temporary body. And I sit and I evaluate in these days of Shahr al-Muharram. How much time do I spend in the beautification of my soul, which is eternal? Where is the beautification of the soul? Where does the nourishment of the soul come from? And where does the corruption of the soul and the disease of the soul come from? It comes within two things. Obedience towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, beautification of the soul. Disobedience through sin is the corruption and disease of the soul. If we understand how much time we need to invest during our lifespans in terms of preparing the nourishment and the beautification of our souls, we now begin to understand the verse of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create jinn or mankind except that they should worship me. How? When I understand my existence is made up of body and soul, and my body is temporary. For what reason was I created to be in this dunya? What is the purpose of my existence? Every human being in his or her life is moving towards a certain direction with a purpose. At least from a dunyawi perspective. Student who goes to school, to college, to university, he has a purpose. Have you ever find any person, student, you ask him, why are you going to university? And he says to you, I don't know. What do you call such a person? Without intellect, without mind. Have you seen a person who starts a business, for example, and you ask him, why did you start the business? Do you have a plan? Do you have a purpose? Do you have a goal? No. He says, no. This person is successful. You think he will be successful? No. Everyone has a goal, even in materialistic things. But then what about when it comes to the grand scheme of understanding our existence and knowing that you are transiting from this dunya to another dunya? We need to have a plan. We need to have a purpose. The purpose of our existence in the dunya is beyond catering for our physical and materialistic needs. Not to say that that is not important, but there is something greater than this, which we can never lose sight of. And time needs to be invested in that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I did not create you. Did not create the jinn or the mankind except that you should worship me. Illa liya'budun. The word the abada over here, the verbal tense, which is derived in its past tense, abada, root verb. From this root verb, one of its derivatives is fi'l mudari, present continuous tense, ya'budun. Ya'budun over here, because it's a present continuous tense, ya'ni, your existence, the purpose of your existence is that so long as you are in this dunya, every breath of yours, leave every action, leave every thought, every breath of yours is in a state of worship. What does that mean? Does that mean Worship does not mean that you are confined to the musalla or you're confined to a prayer mat from morning to evening. La. What is meant by liya'budun in a state of worship is that every breath, every action that you perform is in accordance to the laws stipulated by Allah Azza wa Jalla. Every breath you take and every action you perform, you are refraining from performing the acts that are prohibited by the Sharia. In every aspect of our lives, every breath we shed. This is the true meaning of ibadah. In order to you, look at the steps now. In order for you to reach a state of ibadah, in a continuous state where you're worshipping Allah, your entire existence is revolving around being within the realm of obedience and staying away from the realm of disobedience. In order for you to reach this stage, there is a prerequisite. Yani, the prerequisite of ibadah is what? The prerequisite of ibadah is ilm, which is why you have a verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points this out, Surah Ali Imran, if I'm not mistaken. Surah Ali Imran, verse number 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Shahid Allah, annahu la ilaha illahu wal malaika. Allah bears witness that He is one, there is no God except He. Allah Himself bears witness over Himself. And the malaika bear witness, the angels, that there is no God except He. Because when you bear witness to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tawheed, the next thing is what? Is to worship this Allah. For Allah bears witness upon Himself. The malaika bear witness for this. On top, who? The verse goes on to say, وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ, and the people of ilm. The people of knowledge are the ones who truly understand the tawheed of Allah. In order to worship Allah, you got to know which Allah you are worshipping. Not that you become like those sect of Muslims who believe that Allah has a leg and that leg will be put into Nar Jahannam until Jahannam will say Kafi, Kafi. No. We have this within embodiment of Allah Azza wa Jal within Muslim school of thought. For those who truly understand the concept of Tawheed and who truly worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those who have ilm. For in order to fulfill the purpose of your existence, which is ibadah, you need to have ilm. Sahih Lola. In order to have ilm, who do you go to and where do you go? You need ilm in order to fulfill the purpose of your existence. You need ilm to fulfill the purpose of your existence. And Rasulullah says, Ana Madinatul ilm wa aliyun babuha. I am the city. I am the city of knowledge, and Ali ibn Abi Talib is the door to that knowledge. Yani, this knowledge, which is a prerequisite to fulfill the purpose of your existence, the door to you fulfilling the reason that you were created is Ali ibn Abi Talib. And when Rasulullah says, Ana Madinatul ilm wa aliyun babuha. It's not a joke. And it wasn't a statement made in vain or emotion. No. These hadith of Rasulullah, when matched with the Quran, have deep implications. The door to the fulfillment of the purpose that Allah even gave you life and breath. The door to that fulfillment is Ali alayhi salam. Because without him, you don't have that ilm to understand the tawheed and the ibadah. Without ilm, at its very least, is shirk. There are lots who can worship Allah without ilm. There are those who think they pray salat to Allah. But which Allah they believe in? Is it the Allah that Allah wants us to understand, or is it that Allah who's a creation of their imagination and their tasawwur? Ilm. If the Muslims were to take ilm in regards to ibadah, how to worship Allah from Amir al-Mu'mineen, we would have differences in how Muslims pray Salah today. Salah is the first manifestation of ibadah. You have been created to worship Allah, ibadah, and salat is one of the biggest parts of ibadah. And in order for you to perform salat correctly, you need the ilm. Rasulullah said, Aliyyun babul ilm. Why are the Muslims don't have ittifaq on taking ilm from Amir just on how to recite salat? This in itself would probably solve 90% of the issues that we see today. Why sectarianism? Amir al-Mu'mineen, the ilm of Ahlul Bayt allows us to fulfill the purpose of our existence. And if you understand this, Ahlul Bayt and the teachings of Ahlul Bayt now become the core around which your life revolves. And if you understand that Amir al-Mu'mineen is the door and the reason for the purpose of your existence, you know that Sayyid al-Shuhada is the warith of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And from here you begin to understand the ahamiyah, the importance and the grandeur of these majalis that are established for Sayyid al-Shuhada. These congregations, these commemorations have to do with the purpose of your existence and the nourishment of the soul. For a person to enter into the realm of ibadah, he needs hidayah. And if you are looking for hidayah, Rasulullah said, Inna al-Husayn misbahul huda. Hidayah yani guidance. If you are looking for guidance, Husayn is the lantern of guidance. Rasulullah didn't say that Husayn is guidance. He is the source of guidance. If guidance was to look for guidance, it looks up at Imam al-Husayn. It's the lantern of guidance. And this is this majalis that you have come to revive. And inshallah, we will continue on this theme. And the majalis, inshallah, we have the tawfiq of Mawla to continue over the next few nights while upholding and maintaining all the safety measures that have been requested for us to abide by during these difficult times. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It has always been within the tradition of our ulama and from our khutbah within the Hawzat al-Ilmiyah that the first majalis that is held in the name of Imam al-Husayn, that na'i and that masa'ib goes back to the mother of Sayyid al-Shuhada. For indeed, as we gather on these nights and we convey our condolences to the master of our time, the first person deserving of condolences is Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam, al-Madhluma. This lady who was oppressed, the mother of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And tomorrow night is the first night of Shahrul Muharram. There is something adeem that happens on the first night of Muharram. We will elaborate on that tomorrow. And this first night of Muharram has something great to do with Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. But we convey our condolences to the Imams, and we try to benefit from these nights of Shahr Muharram with the iftitah, with the dhikr of the oppression and the masa'ib of Sayyidat Nisa in Alameen. Which is why the narrations mention that upon the martyrdom of Rasulullah, the final messenger of Islam had not even been buried and had not even been placed in his resting place of abode. And the Muslims stood around on the teachings of Rasulullah, left his body enshrouded in the hands of Amir and Zahra as they fought over leadership of the Ummah. Having gone against the commands of Eidul Ghadir, the people of Saqifa gathered in Masjidun Nabawi. Allah, this Masa'ib of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra is connected with the Masa'ib of Karbala, ya Shabab. All the dhulm that happened in Karbala, and all the tears that you are going to shed for Karbala, the masdar, the source of this dhulm started with Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra and the people of Saqifa. When they gathered in the masjid, the people of Saqifa, they agreed upon getting bay'ah from Amir al-Mu'mineen until they came to the decision that they shall forcefully take this bay'ah from Amir. Which is why the Jibd said to the Taghut of this Ummah, bring Ali to give the bay'ah in the most violent of ways if he disagrees. The narrations mention that 300 people marched towards the house of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen and Amir with their weapons brandished around them. They surrounded the house of Zahra and they lit the fire and they placed firewood around her door and her house. The Taghut of the Ummah then cried out, Ibn Sahak al-La'in, he then cried out, O Ali, come out of the house and give the bay'ah to the Khalif of the Muslims, and if not, لَأَحْرِكَنَّ الْبَيْتُ وَمَنْ فِيهَا. He said, if you do not come out to give the bay'ah, I shall burn down this house and I shall burn down whoever else is in the house. At that time, somebody cried out and they said to him, Ibn Khattab, inside is Hassan and Hussein, the grandchildren of Rasulullah. He replied by saying, Wa'in, even if they are inside, Allah. Which is why when the door was burning, the Sayyidah Zainab, young as she was holding the hand of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, hiding behind him as the flames entered into the house. Ya Zainab, the burning house of your mother is to prepare you for Shame Ghariba. Today you seek shelter behind Imam Hassan, but tomorrow, Zainab, the children of Imam Hassan and Hussein shall seek shelter behind you. Allah. The narrations mention that as the door was lit on fire, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra was choking from the black smoke. She was choking from the black smoke. Her eyes were becoming tearful. The narrations mention that Sayyidah Zahra was finding it hard to breathe as her lungs were getting. Behind the door, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra got crushed between the door and the wall. Allah, Ya Shia, I don't know if you're going to have the heart to listen to this. As Zahra was crushed between the door and the wall, she sat on the ground and she was covered in blood. As she was covered in her blood, and Muhsin has become shaheed. Listen to what the Sha'ir says, what the poet says over here. Ali from the ulama, look at what he says. Sayyidah Zahra is sitting in a pool of blood between the door and between the wall with a punctured lung and choking from the fumes. At this moment, Sayyidah Zahra looked across the house and her gaze met with the gaze of Amir al-Mu'minin. Zahra is looking at Amir, Amir is looking at Zahra. Both of them tears are flowing down their eyes. Amir al-Mu'minin whispers to Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, have patience, O daughter of Muhammad. You are the first martyr. You are the first martyr in the defense of Wilayah. Allah, Allah. At this moment, Sayyidah Zahra is looking at Amir al-Mu'mineen. Tears are coming down her eyes. She's covered in the blood of Muhsin. She replies back, she whispers back, she says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is the covenant I took from my Lord, that I shall sacrifice myself and my child Muhsin for your wilayah, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. And as their eyes were gazing at each other with tears, and they put forward the sacrifice, the narration mentions that the Taghut of this Ummah, Ibn Sa'ad, came and snapped Fatima. He slapped her across the face, Ya Shia. Our teachers, our elders from the Khutbah, this is the final sentence of the Messiah. Our elders from the Khutbah used to say to us that when Sayyidah Fatima Zahra passed away, do not say that she closed both her eyes. Oh, Sayyidah Fatima closed only one eye. They asked why. He said, in the way that Umar had slapped her, her face had become swollen, her eye had become swollen, she was not able to open it. لله وإنا إليه راجعون. مقتل الحسين، مقتل فاطمة.
يا حسين 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 يا حسين
ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों उतर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई, सज्जाद को ज़रीफ़ सदाएं देकर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई, ज़हरा की